Traders, how are you? With Marcello. Today we're going to be doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. Hurricane Ida destroying not only the coast, but also New York City and New Jersey. Inundations everywhere, record high, record amount of inflation, not only in the United States and even the Eurozone. Let's get started. So overall for the week, the markets in the U.S. mostly mixed. The S&P and the NASDAQ hit record highs. The S&P 500 had its 53rd record close in 2021. So of any year from January 1st to August, that is the most amount of record highs. That basically indicates that the market is extremely overvalued, right? The economic numbers aren't really doing that well. We just keep hitting record highs after record highs. And if you guys remember, I think I did upload it here on the English side. Warren Buffett's selling his stocks. Bill Gates is selling his stocks. Eventually, when this thing comes down, it's going to be a doozy. So, just keep that in mind. Overall, overseas market news, the European markets are mostly mixed for the week. It looks like Russia was the biggest winner there. In Latin American markets, the Merval in Argentina was the biggest winner. Canada was up about 0.71. The new communist Republic of Canada with the lockdowns. Africa and the Middle East are mixed. And then we have the far east. That was also higher for the week with the Nikkei boosting up over 5%. A lot of news in Bitcoin in the crypto space. Binance, which is the biggest crypto exchange in the world, not in the U.S. The biggest in the U.S. is actually Coinbase. But the biggest in the world is Binance. They got shut down. If you guys remember from the UK, they banned them. Malaysia also. We now have Singapore banning Binance as well. And if you guys remember, Japan gave them an advisory. They gave them a little warning saying, hey, you need permission to be able to sell your products here. And if you guys remember also in April, Germany also said that they may have violated a law in Germany. To me, it's kind of fascinating where we have these two extremes in the crypto world, where on one hand we have integrations and new technology and further advancements, right? For example, Twitter this week is testing a Bitcoin tipping feature, which is pretty cool. And on the other side, we have the regulation and the shutdowns and the SEC investigating and the IRS investigating. So it's like, which one is going to win, right? Don't doubt it's going to keep going up and going up to record highs, but at what point, if at all, are the governments going to try to shut it down? If you guys see what happened in China, about 60 to 70% of the mining capacity of Bitcoin was in China, and China shut down 90% of the mining. Just ciao. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of how this all ends up later down the line. There was a SEC lawsuit with the BitConnect founder, allegedly $2 billion crypto fraud. And if you guys remember, we had those exchanges even in Canada and all these other places as well. They're getting hacked. And this kind of goes again, right? Kind of those two aspects. On one hand, crypto isn't regulated yet, at least in most countries it's not. And so that kind of is a negative, but at the same time, it's a positive because it isn't regulated. So Louisiana also, this was actually something that's really interesting. And this is something where my mind kind of wanders. Louisiana, they were hit by the huge Cat 4, the fifth strongest hurricane to hit the continental United States, meaning the U.S., not outside of, North America. And 1 million people without power, huge storm, and a lot of stores opening up again. A lot of them with diesel generators and gas generators and things, right? So some people in the dark just trying to sell things, and they didn't accept credit cards. They didn't accept crypto. They just accepted cash. So imagine if something happens. This is kind of where my mind wanders, where, you guys have been following me for a while. I've talked about the next 10 years, we're going to have a lot of social problems, economic problems, natural disasters, things like that. So what's going to happen to your crypto if you can't access it on the web? Crazy to think about, right? Because it's like, well, of course there's always going to be electric. But even in my lifetime, when I was in high school, I remember New York City being out of power. And if you guys are seeing the droughts that are happening in the West, a lot of the dams are literally, not a lot of the dams, but some of the dams are being shut down. They're going to be, they're rationing power essentially in California. They're redirecting, they're not allowing the farmers to use the water because they need it supposedly for the power generation. And that, a few steps ahead, well, what about the food production, right? So that's kind of where my mind wanders, because I kind of think a little bit more further kind of, I guess, than most. Bitcoin for the week is up 1.34%, just a tad under 50,000. Commodities, the hurricane did knock out 95% of all the oil and gas production in the Gulf Coast. If you guys didn't know, 17% of all of the crude capacity in the United States is from the Gulf Coast, and more than 45% of the refining capacity is in the Gulf Coast. So I'm not saying that there's going to be gas shortages, but it's probably going to affect, because they still don't have power as of now, since I'm recording this video. U.S. crude for the week went up just a little bit, 69.29. International crude, which is called Brent, went down just a bit, 72.61. And precious metals for the week, we had a beautiful run up in the miners and gold and silver. You guys know that have been following me for a while. Mostly long trade silver, swing trade it, the miners as well, the stocks of companies that mine the silver. Huge run. We had a NTU, an advanced seminar in Bogota this week. I'll share the video. It's going to be in Spanish, but it's really, really good. So enjoy. Other than that, in finance and banking news, Eurozone inflation data is the worst inflation in the last 10 years, meaning it's the highest percentage. So the worst, meaning, and if you guys don't know what inflation is, it's literally a hidden tax. Because if we have 10% inflation, for example, and you used to buy, let's say, a bag of chips for $1, that bag of chips now costs $1.10. And if you guys are really pay attention, one thing I noticed down here in Colombia, for example, is what they call shrinkflation. So the bottles, the cups from Starbucks, the reason, for example, they call it a venti is because venti is 20 in Italian. 20 ounces. That's why venti, right? That's large. So 20 ounces should be 520 milliliters. That's kind of the different system they use down here to measure things. And it was actually 500 milliliters instead of the 520. And I noticed when I went, for example, places like Firehouse Subs and, like the sub places, even the bag of chips, they were all different sizes because they're getting smaller and you're still paying the same price. So not only is the price of these things going up by 10%, this is in Eurozone, right? In the US, in my opinion, it's about 20-30%. I think it's probably closer to 40 now. But they make you pay the same amount of money, but you get less. And then eventually when those margins are lower, then they start increasing the price. And then it doesn't go backwards, right? So you end up paying for more for less. That's what inflation is, essentially. So keep that in mind. Other than that, Germany also reported on Monday the highest consumer prices since 2008 at a rate of 3.4%. So, I know sometimes when I do these videos, I always do them so you can learn about all the things that are going on, talk about some things that the mainstream media doesn't talk about, which are the natural disasters and things like that. Some of the interesting facts I put in the end, right? Let me know if you guys like those as well. But what happens is, and if you guys don't know this, all of these numbers, unemployment and all these numbers, economic numbers going around, one of the most important numbers is literally the consumer spending data. In the United States, consumer spending is 70%, almost 70% of the economy. In other industrialized countries, even a lot of Latin America, for example, all of Europe, a lot of them are mostly over 50% as well. So when you hear Germany, the fourth largest economy in the world, the most important and largest economy in Europe, say that the highest consumer prices since 2008, we're talking about what, 15 years, 12 years, whatever it is, the consumer is not going to be able to pay the same amount, which means that that's going to affect the economy even more. You see how you connect the dots with all this stuff? And so that's going to be important, because if the fourth largest economy in the world, the consumers aren't spending money, where's the growth going to come from, right? Especially with the Delta Premium Elite 2.0, 3.0, Zelta variant. And now they found another one in South Africa called Mu. I wish they would come up with fancier names. In economic news, India's economy grew at a record pace in quarter two at 20%, even though the economy is still smaller now than it was before the COVID. And India in the future is going to be one of the biggest economies in the world, especially with billions of people, right? China's factory activity grew at a slower pace in August versus July. In addition to that, the PMI reading, which is the Purchasing Manufacturing Index, it's the lowest reading since the height of the pandemic. So we have the prices of consumers going up in a place like Germany. We have record inflation for however many number of years in the Eurozone as a whole. Now you have a place like China, which builds a lot of stuff, right? They make the toys, they make a lot of stuff for the whole world. And now their I was going to say the Spanish word in English, fabricación. The manufacturing data from China is now coming down lower than what it was at the peak of the pandemic. So we're starting to have all these indicators that the economy isn't doing that well. Even the housing data, which I'm going to share with you in a moment, they're not doing well either. The German Federal Statistics Office said on Wednesday that retail sales fell by more than expected in July. Again, consumer spending, right? They go out and buy the retail stuff. You see how you start to put these things together? And then on Friday, the U.S. added 235,000 jobs in August, while the unemployment fell by about 0.2%, even though we still have a lot less jobs now than before the pandemic. In corporate news, U.S. corporate profits surged to a fresh record high in quarter two, boosted by robust demand and higher prices. Now, let's think this through for a second. It doesn't matter what side you're on, right? I try to be apolitical in these videos where I don't talk about the left or the right or kind of these political issues, because I think we're all kind of tired of that, right? But when it comes to kind of what's going on around the world, when it comes to the pandemic and the lockdowns, we have some places that aren't locked down at all. For example, like here in Colombia, everything's fine. Places in the United States like Florida and Texas, and if you compare that to other countries like New Zealand and Australia, where they're literally mandating people put geo-tracking devices in their phone to track people, the U.S. corporate profits surged to a fresh record. Who are the people that run things? The lobbying from the U.S. corporations. They give money to the government, and those are the people who make the rules. I guarantee you, if the U.S. corporations weren't making record profits, they wouldn't be asking for lockdowns and things like that, outside of the health issue, right? So I'm not going to get into whether it's real or fake or the conspiracy theories and all this stuff, but just think kind of that through, that critical thinking, where the lockdowns actually might be good for a lot of these people, especially for the pharmaceuticals, right? Because of the vaccines, and they get paid directly from the government, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that kind of gives you an idea of kind of where we're headed, and part of the reason why, outside of the health issue, why some of these lockdowns might continue. Monday shares, Apple hit a new record high, with rumors saying that the Apple 13 is going to be able to have connections directly to support satellite communications. They also announced that they bought a new streaming service for classical music called Prime Phonic. They didn't disclose the terms of the deal, but they now have over 75 million songs on their platform, which is number one in the world, while Spotify, being number two, has just over 70 million songs. Shares of Support.com in corporate news as well skyrocketed after the Reddit gang is back. The Reddit traders, this year so far, it's up over 1,300%. Again, and if you guys don't know, I did a video on this, but essentially it's public information what companies people short, especially the big hedge funds, right? They have to report that information, and then people can look it up. So the Reddit traders on the forum online in Reddit, they find these stocks, and then they all pump it together, theoretically, to hurt the big guy, but also to make money themselves as well. Even though a lot of people with the GameStop debacle and also the AMC debacle, they actually lost money. They didn't win it. Pennsylvania-based Vinco Ventures, and another popular meme stock among traders, went up so far close to 500% this year. And also in corporate news, Robinhood went down by quite a bit this week, because the SEC is now saying that banning the payment of order flow, which in my opinion is the biggest scam on the planet, is on the table. So Robinhood's steal from the rich and give from the poor, give everybody access to trading, their model might actually be obsolete if the SEC decides to go ahead and continue to ban the practice of order flow, which, by the way, you pay more for than you normally would with a normal brokerage. Trade news, fuel shortages in Lebanon, grappling 2-year economic crisis there in the country. Iran is saying to the U.S. to stay out of their business because they're going to legally send Lebanon oil to be able to go ahead and help them through the process, especially this crisis. In technology on Wednesday, Hewlett Packard, which is the worst computer that you could ever buy, said they won a 10-year, $2 billion contract to supply high-performance computing systems to the U.S. National Security Agency, the same agency that Snowden talked about spying on Americans, if you guys don't remember. And the systems are going to use AI computing. So Apple's king of privacy, going through your cell phone, looking for your pictures. Now the National Security Agency is boosting their computing power. I wonder what's going to happen next. What could possibly go wrong? NASA's newest Mars rover has successfully collected its first rock sample to be able to go ahead and return to Earth. And this one actually is really interesting. The team of researchers at the University of California have developed a microfiber, or an artificial fiber, that performs very much like human muscle fibers. So robots are going to take over the world when the zombies come. In investment news, Apple has been quietly buying dozens of firms annually. They spent billions of dollars, a lot of times just to acquire engineers for expertise that they want to be able to go ahead and invest in. An example would be Beats, for example, which were the headphones and the streaming service they spent $3 billion on in 2014, among others. And on Monday, contracts purchased for previously owned homes. So now we talked about the consumer spending, right? Now we're talking about the housing market, which off the top of my head is roughly 10-11% of the economy, not only the direct housing market, but everything that comes along with that, because a lot of people are in real estate, right? Previously owned homes, the contracts have declined for the second consecutive month in July. So that means that people are starting to buy less houses, which means that that part of the economy now is slowing down too. You guys see how it starts to work? And the median price for new single-family homes is up to $390,000, while existing homes is just under $360K. This obviously has to do with an inventory squeeze because there's not enough properties, especially in in-demand areas like North Carolina and Florida and Texas, and also inflation. Chinese tech developments are looking for new rules to ban Chinese companies for doing IPOs in the United States. In addition to that, the Communist government of China is also passing some pretty interesting laws to be able to go ahead and control the population. One of them being that they're going to limit the time of under 18-year-olds to just 3 hours a week or less when you can play video games. So the government is limiting the amount of time that you can play video games if you're under 18 years old. And also they passed a law saying that feminine men are outlawed from being on TV. It's an order that they passed down. UK car production, it went to a new low in July. Worst performance in the industry since 1956, 37.6% drop compared to July 2020. This obviously has to do with the global chip shortage, the semiconductors. If you guys remember, even Ford and Toyota, all of these guys, they just can't get their hands on any chips anymore, the semiconductors. In Taiwan, it's actually pretty interesting because of a drought, they're rerouting water from the farmers to the semiconductor plants. Remember what I told you just guys a second ago about California? So if we're rerouting all this water that people grow food with, what are we going to eat? Maybe the preppers were right. The zombies are coming. Other than that, they also invited 11 ride-hailing firms like Uber, for example. The Chinese equivalent is Didi, among others, that they should not do unfair practices and do non-compliant behavior like hiring unqualified drivers and using promotions to disrupt a fair market order. And in international events, fifth largest hurricane to hit the continent of the U.S., Hurricane Ida, struck as a Cat 4. Millions of customers are still out of power. One good thing, though, is the $12 billion that was spent reinforcing the levees. Many of you guys probably don't know that New Orleans actually sits below the sea level. So, the sea is here and the city of New Orleans is here, and it's held back by a bunch of walls called levees. They spent $12 billion reinforcing those after Hurricane Katrina, and they luckily held. So that's a good thing. The only problem is the cost of the hurricane is going to exceed most likely $40 billion according to estimates. Celebratory gunfire across Kabul in Afghanistan on Tuesday after the last plane left from the United States. Unfortunately, our government didn't do the right thing, and we did leave not only dogs, service dogs, but a lot of other people behind. Again, it's a really bad situation, unfortunately, there. And Taiwan's defense ministry is saying China's armed forces can now paralyze the island's defenses. They're able to fully monitor its deployments, offering a stark assessment of what's to come in the future. If you guys remember, I think it was under Obama's administration, Russia took Crimea, which was part of Ukraine, and nobody did anything about it. Now we have the situation with Afghanistan during the current administration. What would actually happen, for example, if China just went after Taiwan? Like, is the U.S. really going to stop China? What do you think? And in unusual facts, this is really interesting. The scientists working with Google Quantum Computing Labs have developed a way to create a quantum computer with a crystal. One of the things that's really interesting is scientists are saying that they actually created a new phase of matter, and these crystals, when they change into the configurations, they don't lose or use any energy. Pretty cool, isn't it? Native Americans occupied in the area of Poverty Point in North Louisiana over 3,000 years ago. Again, everybody says that they used to be primitive people back in the day, but now they're finding that they were very complex engineers that were able to build a lot of structures and mounds in a matter of weeks or months. And a medieval manuscript, fragments dated to 1250 and 1275 AD from paleographic handwriting analysis, tells the part of the story of Merlin, which is the famous magician. I thought that was really cool. And in the natural disasters this week, Hurricane Ida, you're going to see some videos here, which is pretty not impressive, pretty sad, unfortunately. New York City got inundated, New Jersey, all the parts of Northeast. Unfortunately, New York for me is kind of like a third world city now. It's not, to me, it's not a first world place anywhere. Even when I go, I don't know if you guys have ever been to New York recently, but it's like all the subways are dirty, and it's just like I don't like New York at all. It used to be nice, but not anymore. There was so much water that the subways were getting inundated, and then there was water literally spouting out of people's bathtubs and people's sinks. I mean, entire houses that were inundated, which is actually pretty incredible to see. Heartbreaking flash floods in Spain. You guys are going to see a video of water literally just tearing a wall down. I mean, it's just like these are the kind of things that I think are coming, unfortunately. And it would be good for you guys to just enjoy your life a little bit, because eventually you probably won't be able to, because you'll be more worried about surviving. Maybe the preppers were right. Germany had a day of snow last week. I'd like to remind you that we were in August, which is supposed to be one of the hottest months of the year. In Germany, it snowed in a city in Germany in August, the middle of the summer, which is unusual. And in Iceland, volcano melted ice once it started activating and flooded the south part of Iceland. One of the things that you may not know, in 2017, they found that under the ice in Antarctica is the highest concentration of volcanoes in the world. If one of those volcanoes goes off, that would literally change the climate in the world, which is actually pretty scary. And the second largest river in South America is going dry. A lot of cargo goes through that river, very similar to the Mississippi River. Argentina is the third largest exporter in corn in the world, and now they're not able to export the same amount of cargo due to the fact that the ships can't get through because the water levels are so low. It's a 70-year drought, or I should say the worst drought in 70 years. And the question is, some of you guys, even in the UK, have already seen the food shortages. Some of you in more rural areas are starting to see them. In the urban areas, I don't think you're seeing it as much. But we have, in California, they're rerouting water where they grow food for power generation. Taiwan as well. Now we have rivers that are going too low. Food shortages coming. Prepare yourselves. The zombies are coming. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you next week.